diving into one of the most significant events of the 20th century, the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was a night that symbolized freedom, unity, and the end of decades of division. On November 9, 1989, after 28 years, the wall that had split Berlin and the world finally came down. But how did this massive concrete barrier go up in the first place? And what were the key moments that led to its eventual fall? We're going to cover all of that and more, exploring why the wall was built, what life was like on each side, and what brought it down. To understand why the Berlin Wall was built, we need to go back to the end of World War II in 1945. After the Allies defeated Nazi Germany, the country was divided into 4 zones, each controlled by one of the Allied powers: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France. Berlin, the capital, though located entirely in the Soviet-controlled eastern part of Germany, was also divided among these 4 powers. The differences between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies quickly turned into a standoff. The western zones of Germany, supported by the US, the UK, and France, rebuilt under democratic principles, while the Soviet-controlled East developed as a communist state, influenced by Moscow. The contrast between East and West became especially stark in Berlin. West Berlin flourished with a capitalist economy, vibrant cultural life, and more freedoms. East Berlin, on the other hand, struggled under an authoritarian government with limited economic growth, restrictive policies, and strict surveillance. By the 1950s, East Germany faced a major problem. Citizens were fleeing en masse to the west. It's estimated that nearly 3 million East Germans defected to West Berlin, hoping for better economic opportunities and freedom. This brain drain drained East Germany of skilled workers and professionals, creating a crisis for the communist government. So, in response, the East German government, backed by the Soviet Union, made a drastic move. On the night of August 13, 1961, East German troops and workers suddenly began constructing a massive wall. Overnight, the Berlin Wall cut off families, friends, and communities, effectively ending the movement of people between East and West Berlin. The official claim was that the wall was built to protect East Germany from fascists, but in reality, it was a desperate attempt to prevent further defection. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as the most visible symbol of the Cold War, a constant reminder of the division between East and West. But what was life like on either side? In West Berlin, life was more prosperous and free. Supported by the Western powers, West Berlin became a showcase of democracy and capitalism. The Western Allies invested heavily in the city, and West Berliners enjoyed a relatively high standard of living, freedom of expression, and access to consumer goods. West Berlin became a cultural hub, known for its nightlife, music scene, and political activism. In East Berlin, however, life was very different. The East German government, under the control of the Socialist Unity Party, maintained strict surveillance over its citizens. The infamous Stasi, the East German secret police, closely monitored the population, turning neighbors and even family members into informants. The economy was state-controlled, limiting economic growth and restricting access to many goods and services. Although healthcare and education were freely provided, everyday freedoms were restricted. People couldn't travel freely, choose certain careers, or express dissent without facing repercussions. Despite this repression, some East Germans still found ways to defy the state, such as secretly listening to Western radio, watching Western television, or sharing news smuggled in from the West. Life in East Berlin was a constant balancing act of survival, resilience, and quiet rebellion. Throughout the 1980s, cracks in the Soviet Union's control over Eastern Europe started to show. Under Mikhail Gorbachev, the new Soviet leader, policies like glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, encouraged reforms and greater freedom of expression. These policies aimed to modernize the Soviet system, but they also empowered movements across Eastern Europe that wanted change. Countries like Poland and Hungary saw massive protests with citizens demanding freedom and reform. East Germany was slow to adopt these changes, with its leadership resisting reforms even as unrest grew. In the summer of 1989, a tipping point came when Hungary, one of East Germany's neighbors, opened its border with Austria, effectively creating an escape route from east to west for the first time. Thousands of East Germans took advantage, traveling to Hungary to escape through Austria to West Germany. East German authorities struggled to contain this wave of defections, and discontent within East Germany grew as citizens demanded similar freedoms. By October, large-scale protests were spreading across East Germany, especially in Leipzig and East Berlin. People gathered in the streets, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people," and calling for change. The East German government, under pressure from the public and the surrounding reforms, began to crack. By November, they decided to make a significant concession, allowing East Germans to apply for permission to travel to the West. Here's where things took a surprising turn. On November 9, 1989, an East German official, Günter Schabowski, announced at a press conference that East Germans would be allowed to cross the border. But there was a mix-up. When asked when the new rules would take effect, Schabowski, unaware of the exact timing, simply replied, "As far as I know, effective immediately without delay." That announcement spread like wildfire. People took to the streets, heading to the Berlin Wall's border crossings, demanding to be let through. Overwhelmed and uncertain of the new rules, the guards, who hadn't received any clear instructions, eventually relented and opened the gates. Thousands poured through, cheering, celebrating, and climbing the wall in disbelief and excitement. That night, East and West Berliners reunited in a spontaneous and historic celebration. People took hammers and chisels to the wall, chopping off pieces as souvenirs. For many, it was a moment of personal victory, a sign that the oppression and division of the Cold War era were finally over. The fall of the Berlin Wall symbolized hope, freedom, and the beginning of the end for communist regimes across Eastern Europe. The fall of the Berlin Wall had massive implications, not only for Germany, but for the world. Within a year, Germany was officially reunified, and East and West Berlin were joined once again as a single city. But reunification wasn't without challenges. Integrating two societies with different political, social, and economic systems required a great deal of time, money, and patience. Even today, the wall in the mind can still exist, as older generations remember the division and the younger generations work to bridge any lingering gaps. The fall of the Berlin Wall also marked the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. Across Eastern Europe, communist regimes started to crumble as citizens demanded reform. Countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia moved towards democracy, inspired by the events in Germany. The Soviet Union itself faced internal pressures and dissolved just 2 years later in 1991, bringing an end to the Cold War. Globally, the fall of the Berlin Wall reshaped international relations. It ushered in an era of greater cooperation between East and West and allowed for the expansion of organizations like the European Union, which helped integrate Eastern European countries into the global economy. The world became more interconnected, and the division between East and West gradually faded as democracy and capitalism spread across the former Eastern Bloc. Today, the Berlin Wall exists mostly in memory, but parts of it still stand as a reminder of the struggle and sacrifice endured by those divided by it. Sections of the wall remain in Berlin, covered in graffiti and artwork that symbolize freedom, resistance, and the resilience of the human spirit. The East Side Gallery, one of the largest remaining sections, is now an open-air art gallery that attracts visitors from around the world. Pieces of the wall have also been distributed worldwide, with fragments displayed in cities from Washington, D.C. to Moscow. These remnants remind us of the cost of division and the power of unity. For Berliners and the world, the wall serves as both a historical artifact and a cautionary tale. So that's the story of the Berlin Wall, a symbol of oppression that came to represent freedom and unity. The fall of the wall wasn't just the end of a physical barrier. It was the end of an era of division and the beginning of a new, more interconnected world. Reflecting on this moment, it's incredible to think about how a single night changed the lives of millions and reshaped world history. It makes us wonder, what walls, physical or metaphorical, still stand today? What lessons can we learn from the resilience of those who endured the division? If you enjoyed this journey through history, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into pivotal moments like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.